Campside Media.
Hey, Campside listeners. Welcome back to Inside the Tent, our show where we go behind the microphone of our favorite podcasts and talk to the people who brought them to life. I'm Ashley Ann Krigbaum, a senior producer at Campside. Today, I'm talking with the award-winning journalist, educator, and podcast host, Ben Austen. If you want more exclusive content or to go behind the scenes on our shows, make sure to go to joincampside.com to become a free member of the Campside community. That's joincampside.com. For over a year, Ben and I worked closely together and with our team at Campside and our friends at Atwill Media and Audible to create possibly the most ambitious show Campside has taken on so far, The Last Days of Cabrini-Green. The story begins with Dantrell Davis, a child who was killed by gunfire outside of his elementary school at the Chicago public housing complex, Cabrini-Green. Then, the show shifts to focus on the story of how Dantrell's death accelerated big changes to public housing policies in Chicago and America. It's a massive story involving Chicago city planners, the mayor, even then-President Bill Clinton. But at the heart of it all is Dantrell's mother, Annette Freeman. Instead of approaching this story in a strictly nonfiction audio documentary style, we wanted to blend the reporting and interviews Ben did with actor performances, including Patina Miller and Corey Stoll, to highlight the emotional moments of Annette and Dantrell's relationship, along with the drama that unfolded in City Hall. The show is now out on Audible. Welcome, Ben, to Inside the Tent.
Hey, Ashley Ann. Oh, my gosh. It's so great to be in conversation with you.
Same. It's good to see you. And also, it feels so good. Our show is finally out.
Yeah, working with you, what a joy. You know, it's just been amazing.
Same, dude. Thanks for joining us and wanting to just be in conversation about what I think are some of the most interesting parts of the journey we took with this show and this story. Before the show production began, you had already published a book looking deeply into Cabrini-Green, its residents, and the battle they had to keep their homes after the city decided to close the complex. The book, High Risers, Cabrini-Green and the Fate of American Public Housing, was longlisted for the Andrew Carnegie Medal of Excellence in Nonfiction and named a Best Book of the Year by Booklist, Mother Jones, and I think is really cool, the public libraries of Chicago and St. Louis.
Killing it.
I know. Congratulations. So what was it like to take a new look at this reporting for an audio-only style project?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about Cabrini-Green originally when it was being disappeared. So there were 23 towers there, you know, like between 15,000 and 25,000 people on just 70 acres of land. And so to think about what happened to all those people, to think about Cabrini-Green was a public housing complex in Chicago that was also vilified, demonized. So to look at like this sort of tension between myth and reality, the things that fascinated me, the questions, they hadn't gone away. So I wanted to still visit them. And Cabrini-Green, I think, explains Chicago. It explains America. It explains how we think about race and politics. So it was really powerful to come at it again, to think that we need to know this story. You know, another way to introduce it to people, to explain that to people.
When I first joined the project, before you and I even got to meet each other, I read that book twice. And the thing that really stuck out to me is that you have so many transcripts from oral histories, like recordings that you did for that book. And it just really felt like these are voices. And it made me excited as an audio producer to know I'm working with a dude who likes to talk and hear people.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. Yeah, that's right. That's right. The book is really when I talk about sort of that tension of myth and reality. So then the myth is like how it was built up into a kind of place in quotation marks, Cabrini-Green as an abstraction. The reality is like, what was it like for real people who lived there? And that was the work in a lot of ways to sort of like, I mean, I could sort of research endlessly to find all the ways that Cabrini-Green has been represented and written about and talked about. but then like to talk to actual people who and all the complications. And that gets us to the story in a lot of ways of Dantrell Davis and Annette Freeman.
Because the book, you are going through a huge timeline, like close to 100 years. And so for our show, we've got only a certain amount of episodes. And how did you come to deciding like what to focus on from such a big story into what became The Last Days of Cabrini-Green, the show?
I've been obsessed with this moment of the early 1990s as like a pivot point in American history and American urban history. And maybe this is a very Gen X thing to say, like, because that's where I am. But to think of like how cities and America have transformed, deindustrialization, moves to suburbs, cities today, something happening at that moment in the 90s where there's a moment in time that is changing, it is in flux. And like there's this hypertension. And so many of our policies today, so many of the ways we think about one another feel like they're explained from this moment. And so, and at the heart of it, for this story about Cabrini-Green, is this murder, this crime that happens, that becomes a sensation. 1992, the 7-year-old boy is shot. He's holding his mother's hand on the way to school. It's devastating on the most intimate, personal way. But then it becomes a civic crisis. It becomes a national talking point. Dantrell Davis is killed right around the time that the movie Candyman comes out, which is set at Cabrini-Green. And the two are intertwined and inextricable in like the public imagination. So it felt like both an era, but this hyper dramatic moment, which has all these ramifications. And then also just the most personal, intimate kind of pain at the same time.
And taking this huge, expansive story that can go in so many different ways, but deciding to try to bring in moments of intimacy, moments of sitting with people who are at the heart of the story, thinking about how we approached fictionalized elements with the nonfiction. We talked a lot about how the purpose of doing that is to highlight the emotional core of what's going on for all these different folks at the heart of the story, whether it's Annette and Dantrell or Mayor Daley at the time, or these other figures who are in Chicago city government. To do that, you co-wrote this show with playwright Harrison Rivers. Shout out Harrison.
Harrison, amazing.
Amazing. How did you approach script writing and balancing the documentary side with the theatrical side with Harrison?
Yeah, and I think you said it really well. How to bring something to life. A podcast doesn't work if it's just Ben Austen speaking. So like, what other voices are going to bring this to life? What other ways to animate it? And so there's lots of archival, which we could find. And in my own reporting, the journalistic side, there are also interviews to conduct, to talk to people who also experienced it, where you don't have to hear me telling it to you. Let's go talk to those people. And then this other part, which is what you said at the beginning of like this ambitious, innovative thing we wanted to do. What about scripted scenes? What about this being a scripted series? And that kind of immediacy of people acting this out, and far better actors than I'll ever be. It felt raw and powerful. I think of this amazing scene that Harrison writes at the beginning of Annette Freeman with her son, Dantrell Davis. And Annette is played in the series by the incredible Patina Miller. I mean, crazy that she's in this. She's so talented. And just hearing her talking to her son and then experiencing the worst thing that a mother could ever imagine.
Danny, boy, why you be looking at me like you don't hear me?
What?
Go do something.
Mom, I am doing something.
Oh yeah, you doing something, huh? You think you doing something.
Yeah.
Yeah, go smile. Go on and get across the street.
To hear Patina Miller as Annette Freeman act out this moment. And then right after that, to hear me in conversation with the real Annette Freeman in the present. And the two together I don't know, there's some alchemy that happens there. Like, that's what we were going for right there. That's it.
And you and I have never tried to do a blend of fiction and nonfiction before, right? I know I haven't.
Yeah, I mean, as a nonfiction writer, I use all the tools of fiction in my writing. I'm recreating scenes and all this, but to take that other leap, you want it to feel like you're at the movies. You just want to be lost in this completely and experience it. And I think there are these moments when it's just fully realized. And this is part of Harrison Rivers' amazing writing. This also just kind of atmospheric writing that he could do. Writing scenes that feel like you're in a church at the funeral, like you're at Cabrini-Green and there are people there living their lives. It's transporting.
In that process of writing for this show, was there like a certain hurdle that y'all hit up against that you got through? Obviously, the show's good,
Yeah.
but that's something that folks might be able to learn from, especially other journalists who might want to approach blending these storytelling styles.
Yes, of course. Like figuring out what that relationship of the two is. What's the relationship between the journalistic reported side and the scripted? How are they going to work together? What are they advancing in terms of plot, character, scene, setting? It took figuring out, and it's sort of reverse engineer, like when we got to the end, I sort of wish we knew some of the stuff at the beginning of like, how do we move things along? What is each one accomplishing? And I had a lot of the information in my head because it's the book I wrote and how to share all of that. If I was talking to other writers who were embarking on this, really kind of map out what each part can accomplish in advancing something. And it doesn't always stay the same. Like it's one part moving along the narrative in a plot sense, more information is one part, like just creating atmospheric, setting emotional development. Being really intentional about that, I think, is probably the best advice.
What was your favorite part about working on this show? Whether it was a moment doing something or hitting an achievement or unlocking something, what do you take away from this?
I wasn't that interested in just repeating stuff I already did. So the parts that I probably took the most from is new reporting that I had to do. Because reporting is also learning, it's meeting people, it's getting experience beyond your own. One of my favorite parts, you come to Chicago and we're doing on-the-ground reporting and it's batshit cold in Chicago. I mean like polar vortex cold, like 20 below zero cold, for real, like that's not an exaggeration. And we go to the former site of Cabrini-Green to meet with Annette Freeman, and spending time with her there, first of all. Oh, God, we went into this church, Holy Family Church. It's been there for about 60 years. And just like touring there with the pastor. And in the sanctuary, there was a giant painting on the wall of Fred Hampton, the Black Panther leader, as Jesus.
Yeah.
And Annette is there sort of processing this and then talking about being there as a young person and remembering like days when she came into this church. That was amazing. All of that time of that spending it with Annette. And I think this comes across weirdly in the podcast too, of like just an affinity that she and I have for one another. Interviewing is a very intimate process. What she shares is so raw and personal. Just spending time with her and learning more about her, that felt really meaningful. And even the other reporting, I mean, like there's a whole other part of the podcast where we find a wrongful conviction suit, possibly. And the person who was sent to prison for the murder of Dantrell Davis is still in prison. And tracking him down, his name is Anthony Garrett, and his lawyer, Jennifer Blagg, and talking to him from prison, talking to the lawyer, doing that more reporting and finding these weird connections that, the cop that he claims abused him is actually like caught up in some other stuff at Guantanamo Bay and other things. You're like, oh my gosh, there's like a pattern here. That also felt really alive rather than sort of like me sharing with you guys and then the audience, the reporting that I've already done.
What do you hope folks will learn about Chicago by listening to this show?
I love Chicago. And Chicago is also a really complicated and difficult place, incredibly racially segregated, a sense of sort of tough-nosed politics. I think you get that sense here. And also people who are so committed to the city, trying to find a place here and fight for their rights. I mean, all of that comes forward. Yeah, we get to bring to life so much of this history that is somewhat forgotten. Something like this gang truce, which comes out of Dantrell Davis's death and the aftermath. Black gangs decide to call a peace treaty, and it really happens. That's an extraordinary thing and something to build on and think about. And it's like lost to all the kind of fear-mongering that has come after it. To dive into this moment, which I said like the 90s, to think about how the reverberations from there are still being felt. Yeah, it's about geography of the city. It's about the politics. It's about the architecture. It's about the people. It's all there. It's like the whole thing. And, Chicago is in some ways the testing ground for the country. It's not these coastal cities that are sort of anomalies. So it's a way to understand the country.
For folks who want to get to know your work better, where can they read, see, hear what you've been up to?
You can find these books anywhere. High Risers, Cabrini-Green and the Fate of American Public Housing. I have another book called Correction, Parole, Prison, and the Possibility of Change. I have another podcast on Audible, another long series like this one. It's called The Parole Room. And you can really you can sit down and hear what parole hearings are like. I have work on This American Life that recently came out. This is the Case of Henry D. is the episode. I write for the New York Times Magazine. I write for Chicago Magazine. I write all over the place. I have another podcast, a talk one on Pushkin with my best friend, Khalil Gibran Muhammad. It's called Some of My Best Friends Are... ... And just, I'm around. People can check me out.
Thanks for making time to go inside the tent with us, Ben. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to work with you and also just chop it up in our closets with our microphones.
Yeah, same. Same times too.
You can listen to the show now through Audible. The Last Days of Cabrini-Green was written by our guest, Ben Austen and Harrison Rivers, produced by me and Abukar Adan. The At Will team included Will Malnati, Rosie Guerin, Ashley Taylor, Lee Mengistu, and Tina Turner, with sound design by the Chicago-based company Hemlock Creek. You can hear the full credit roll when you listen to the show. And thank you for listening to Inside the Tent. If you haven't already, don't forget to go to joincampside.com to become a free member of the Campside community. That's joincampside.com. Happy listening, y'all.